Hello everyone, welcome to the first session of the day. In a world where assumptions once ruled, data has taken the lead role. Our first session is one that speaks directly to the evolving role of technical writers in a data-driven world. And who better to walk us through this blockbuster shift than Karunaharan? With over 14 years of experience in technical writing, Karuna began his career crafting aircraft maintenance manuals at Capgemini and now leads user assistance at SAP Labs India Private Limited for major SAP products.
In his session, Data-Driven User Assistant, Karuna will explore how data analytics makes the content smarter, more discoverable, and more useful. Because when the data speaks, it's not just a plot twist, it's the whole story. Because in the documentation universe or our docuverse, data isn't just a sidekick, it's the hero we have been waiting for. Please join us in welcoming Karunaharan to the stage with thunderous applause.
Thank you. Good morning all. Thanks for that warm welcome. Yeah, I'm going to talk a bit about data-driven user assistance. Again, why it is important, why it is more relevant now than ever, right? And what are the different ways that you can implement in your organization to gather data. And I also don't want to talk too much shows and numbers so that it's appealing and interesting for you, and recommend some best practices that organizations can follow. And if an organization has not implemented data-driven user assistance, what are the ways to do it is what I'm planning to cover. Before we start, I know the weather is cozy, let's do some warm-up. Right? So the moment I say data-driven, what comes to your mind? It could be anything that's complex, it could be anything that's simple, but what do you think, or what can you think of when I say data-driven? What could be data for a technical writer? Can you think of anybody in the audience?
Taking decisions based on the data.
Good. Yeah, we are trying to take decisions based on data, but I'm just asking what would be data for a technical writer?
Like page views, number of page views and all those.
Yeah.
Usage metrics.
Bounce rates and all.
Usage metrics, yeah. Somebody else, please, yeah.
Number of hits for a document.
Yeah, number of hits for a documentation.
It could be search terms.
Search terms, yeah. So I think some of you are already there, but it could be as simple as this, right? So if you can see it on the other screen, major companies like Google, Microsoft, what they do on their help web page is that they simply ask you for feedback. So if you see, they ask you a thumbs up and a thumbs, they just ask you whether it is good or not. And as a user, what you do is you just say thumbs up, thumbs down. And when you say thumbs down, they ask you questions like was it really helpful, was it not helpful, what was the problem, and you just simply fill some buttons and close it, that's all. But what eventually, and there are other things like we can also take detailed feedback from you where it is descriptive, right? And this is what Microsoft does. They have combined both into a single dialogue. This is what SAP does. SAP takes feedback and they also ask the same thumbs up and thumbs down. So what eventually companies do out of this is they go back, gather data, all these data, and build really good custom dashboards out of it, give it to their technical writers so that they can take meaningful decisions out of it. So it could be data-driven, could be as simple as this, right? So what is data-driven user assistance? Like it was told in the introduction, we want to move away from the world of assumptions and gut feelings and all those things and purely go with data so that you take informed decisions, right? And what could those decisions could be, right? So now should we as a team, where should we invest our priorities, right? As a technical writer, there could be 1,000 things that you do, but what is priority as a team for you? And what form of different content formats is a wise decision for me. Say for example, text is not something that is going to continue. It is going to evolve into comics and videos and a lot of other things. Whether investing into those things is a wise decision for me as an organization. And we keep writing content again and again, but is it really helping our end user solving their problems? If not, then what is the point of writing it? How are you going to analyze all this without talking to your customers is something that we are going to identify. And most importantly, like Punit said, I am sure many of you in your organizations, at least in your early stages, would have come up with this question. Do really people read documentation? This is something that's commonly asked. So you can also take this as an opportunity to show your team, your managers, and your organization and find the benefits that you provide to your organization and your customers, right? Because there is a team that's existing, right? How is the organization first benefited and how are the customers benefited? So all this is what we are trying to look into in this session. Why it is more relevant now? Now, most of you might already have moved to cloud technologies, and cloud is here to stay for a long time. We are slowly moving from the old on-premises world, we are moving to the cloud technologies, right? So, and in cloud, customers drive the outcome, customers drive the pace of development itself. You know, in the past, you could have developed or shipped your software once in a year or once in 2 years. Today I know my team friends who are shipping software every 2 weeks. So within those 2 weeks, how fast or how much are you going to write, right? You cannot write the same way that you write for a software that is shipped once in 2 years. The same logic may not apply for the software that is being shipped once in 2 weeks or once in a month. So where are you going to make those informed decisions on what to write and how to write? So those are the things very important now. And now, in general, I always believe a product is the software plus documentation. So now you cannot ship just the software when you say I'm shipping the product. The documentation also has to go along with it. So how are we going to come up with decisions for those? And it's not just that. Now the pace of delivery is increased or become very faster. It is also important that we make the content, improve the content findability, experience and usefulness. How are we going to make all these things with the data that we have? So that's why it is more relevant now because of the shift in the technologies and other things. What can we do? So now we spoke about these benefits. What can we do? We can come up with accurate and meaningful analysis and interpretation of the content that is already published by you. You can make sound decisions, identify which exact pieces are really solving customer problems and focus on that. Decide where you should invest the overstretched resources. So I'm sure most of you in your organizations face situations where there are priorities, there are overstretched resources where one person does beyond one person's work. So there you kind of understand what is priority and what can take a backseat. And we should be spending our time on developing content that's providing the most value for users. How are we going to find what is the most value for our users, right? And provide the answers they're looking for. Somebody said search terms. So they are looking for something, are you providing that in your documentation, right? And also help users engage and adopt our technologies. If the end users are not going to adopt your product or the technology that you offer, there is no point in shipping the product or the documentation. How are you going to make this engagement better? So these are the reasons why we think the data-driven user assistance is more relevant now. How do we gather data, right? So this is where the actual process of gathering data comes into. Like I showed, the data sources can be different things, as simple as asking a question in your web page. There is no better feedback than direct feedback that you take from your users, right? That's the first thing. And there are always different stakeholders in different companies, which varies for different organizations. There is product support, there is product management, there is customer support, there are field agents, there are enablers. So there are different stakeholders who actively work with the end users and customers. You can talk to them. You can do customer engagements if you have good customer base. You can do surveys. If you see these days, many websites, they show a pop-up and ask for quick 10 questions asking for what we feel about the content, or to be an e-commerce website, they ask questions. And like I showed at the first slide, there are topic usefulness questions where we ask thumbs up and thumbs down. And there are always tools, right? So these are the different ways that you can get direct feedback, and then there are tools like web analytics tool, tracking tools, and based on all the data that you gather, you can create custom dashboards. Before moving on to the next slide, I want you to take a moment and think what is the difference between the things on the left and the right. What do you think is the difference here between these data sources and the tools? Because that will help us understand why we need tools.
Tools can be automated, right? Automated way of doing things.
Tools is like a framework from where you get the data. Data, like for example, survey. To make a survey, you need something. So, tool is something that helps you to conduct survey.
Yeah, I hear words like automation and framework. Anybody else?
These tools
Hi, I'm Nisha, and these tools help provide insights from data.
Okay, insights. So, yeah, I mean, these are really good answers. But the basic thing here is on the left side, whatever you see, are direct feedback, and I would call it reactive feedback, where you go ask someone, they can give you feedback, and then you gather it, and then you do whatever decisions out of it. What you see on the right side is what I call proactive data. You don't go ask your customers, you don't go talk to your end users, but you don't even have to spend time with them. The tools will help you do that. So this is proactive data. Now, for example, you have a product where there are 1,000 customers or 1,000 users. It would take years for you to go and talk to all 1,000 users, or at least one user from each company, and then to gather data and then come up decisions will easily take years. With tools, we already have patterns, we already have insights, we already have interesting information, where the tool will help us find based on the usage of the customers, right? So that's where the tools are coming into the picture these days. There are a lot of interesting tools in the market, which I will show in the last slide. And that's where it's important that we become more and more proactive than reactive. We don't want to wait for end users to come and give feedback. Instead, we make use of these tools. And that's why the need for tools. Now, there are always direct mechanisms, you talk to your users, but what are the need for having digital analytics tools? Like I said, customers are looking for on-the-go help content. Enterprises are also moving towards online and mobile help because customers are looking for on-the-go. And we have to be proactively catering for the user's needs, right? And what are the advantages? You know the consumption and the feedback before even the user comes and tell you. And you push, I'm sure most of you use data structure writing, whatever the technologies are that is available with us today. You push all your available metadata to your tools, the tracking tools, then it becomes easier for you to break down, do all the slices and dices, then it becomes very interesting for you to find data out of these tools. We have done enough talking, so I'll show some sample anonymized data, right? So, and from which you can understand what level of information that we can gather or insights that we can gather. Is it legible for you? Okay, so this is a anonymized data of one of the product, where this product has got 7-8 different deliverables. I mean, I'm sure you all work on installation guides, developers, admin, user, security, what's release notes, right? So this anonymized data for 1 year looks into what is the frequently consumed deliverable of that particular product, and then you basically this gives you an idea of, yes, my documentation is first be consumed, and the numbers are in thousands range, right? And across, and like somebody mentioned, you can see page views, visits, how many visitors, and all those things. You get a basic idea of, yes, people are consuming, and then you break down to what are they consuming within your deliverable set. And now if you look at the biggest chart, there is the developer guide. So this is where, as a writer or an individual contributor or a manager, you take decision on what is priority. So there are times when it is becoming difficult to handle too many things, the delivery spans have become smaller. Now with the data, you know what is priority. And with data, your teams also understand, yes, my documentation is consumed. It is important that we have to cater to our audience because they will keep coming back again and again. Right? So this is a basic number that you can look into. And then there are times where not everybody works on the complete documentation. There are portions to which you contribute as beginners or juniors, right? So then I'm looking into one particular guide and seeing what are the top 10 pages in my documentation, right? That will give me an understanding of what my users are consuming. Now, if I have to wait for 12,000 users to come back and give me data, it is going to take ages, right? So with the tool, I try to understand, okay, these are my top 10 topics. I know if there is a problem here, then my customers are going to give a back feedback. So this is how you break down and then understand what is important. And then this is another interesting anonymous data where as a technical writer, you could even add value to the product, right? Not just documentation. So if you look at this is anonymized data for a particular product, which is natively available as an app on Windows, on Mac, on Android, and Safari, and different OSs, right? The product team unfortunately did not have telemetry about this. They didn't know where are the users coming from. So we took a safe assumption that probably if they are using the product on Windows, they might as well use the help on Windows. That was a safe assumption that we made. And then you could see simply the graph is straightforward. 75% of your users are on Windows and more than 80% of your users are on Chrome, right? So now as a product team, they could make a decision that when we are shipping, like I said, the delivery spans become shorter. The first delivery happens for Windows, right? And the second, they could push the deliveries of Mac and other OSs a bit later. And where did this information come from? Purely from the numbers of help documentation. Again, if your product or your app is not going to work on Chrome, you know 75% of your users are down. And all those interesting data comes from here. So this is how, as a help person or a technical writer, you help your product team to make informed decisions. This is something called a followed chart. So you might as well have a lot of scenarios where you expect your users to do step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4, right? So here what I'm trying to understand is, okay, I have good number of users, but are they really completing the task that I want, which I intend them to complete? You can see the blue color number at the bottom. It says only 18% of them complete what I want them to complete from the starting point. So it is not just a good number that there are 7,000 people who are starting, but of which only 18% of them are completing. Then where is the problem? Is it the product itself, the documentation not sufficient? Are there gaps in the documentation? These are the things that you can find out with this data. This is again related to the previous one. Again, this was very helpful for the not just the documentation team, but also for the product. The retention rate. So what we found interesting here was more than, or at least on average, 80% of the users were coming back within less than 24 hours the moment they started something to come back and finish their task, because they were coming back less than 24 hours to read the documentation again and complete it. So now in this 24 hours, if your product is not working or your help portal or the help documentation is not working, then you have a problem. This was especially for a trial software, and trial software these days, you know, everybody offers trial, and if the trial is not good, they are not going to buy your product. So we eventually made sure that within that 24 hours, if any trial user is going to give you feedback or any issues, reporting, email about the product not working, we made sure that we had an agreement, internal agreement of less than 24 hours to solve the problem. And where this all information the product team got? Purely from the help data. And I'm sure, like you said, what is popularly searched within the documentation, right? You might have a guide, you might have different guides for the whole product, but what are my customers looking for? And this is what they're looking for within my product. Now I know what are they looking for when they come to the documentation, and accordingly I rewrite my content. And I'm sure most of you have your translations, right? And translations and cost and effort. Now, whether the translated versions are being consumed or not, that is what I'm trying to understand. And if the translated version is not consumed, then I am going to save money and effort for my organization. And not just that, say in this chart you see there are some 26,000 users for the Japanese version. But where are the Japanese users coming from is what I'm trying to understand in the next chart. The second breakdown you can see, there are the Japanese translated version it's consumed in Japan location itself, which is what I am trying to understand. Or you could also find interesting data like Japanese version is consumed in different regions. I mean, why is that happening? So all those slice and dice you can figure out from such data. And this is something that I show off. This is called the flow chart or the flow diagram. So I know as a user, the middle one is my popularly consumed topic, right? I want to find where are they coming from and where are they going next, right? This gives me an idea of why they are coming to my documentation. And in this case, it might not be legible, but I find it what is there on the left and what is there on the right, most of the time it is the same, which means your users are circling. They started somewhere, came to your topic, they went to the first point again. Why are they circling? Okay, and sometimes you would know your product better, that you would know what could be the starting point and what could be the ending point. If the users are taking the same journey, then you know the documentation is serving its purpose. If not, then you know there is some problem and you can improve upon it, right? So these are some basic samples that I can think of where with the data you can always go and improve your documentation. I just quickly want to talk about the life cycle. So there are different ways of implementing data analytics in an organization, but this is something in general across the world is recommended. So it's a cycle. You start with defining your goals. The interesting thing with numbers is that the moment you start looking into the numbers without goal, it takes you deeper and you will never know that you have spent so much time without doing anything. So it's always better to start with a goal. What is the problem that you are going to solve? And most of the times you might not even know what is the problem that I'm going to solve. So you can always get inspired from others, right? So you have your goal and then define what are the deliverables, what are the timelines that I'm going to look into and how best I can derive data. Then use tools, whatever techniques. It need not necessarily be Adobe or Google or any other software, but it can be even as simple as directly asking your user and then gather data. It is always recommended to use additional insights. When I say additional insights, is by talking to your customers or having the context for the numbers, talking to your product support, talking to your product management. They can always give you some additional insights. Then rightly interpret the data. So it is always possible that you can wrongly interpret. That's why it is always recommended to go with all these additional insights, take it to your stakeholders and then rightly interpret, make changes in your documentation, and then it's a cycle. And you cannot expect results overnight. It is always over a period of 3 months, 6 months, the performance improves. And how organizations can implement if they are not already done. So first thing that you have to do is define your goals. The technical writing management team in an organization must decide what is the goal or what is the problem that you want to solve. And in-house analytics expert team is must, because everybody would interpret numbers in a different way. That's the specialty of numbers, because you can always assume whatever you want and interpret it. Have an expert team, train your writers, train your teams, and then capture data. So when I say capture data, decide what tool you want or what are the mechanisms that you are going to use to capture the data. Again, if you are intending to buy a software, then all this depends on what software that you are going to buy and how many users, right? If you are a team of say 50 technical writers and all 50 want access to the tool, then the license and the cost, everything is involved. Decide upon all those things. After capturing, analyze the data. Again, this is something that usually goes wrong in every organization, because everybody would interpret numbers in their own ways. So always have measures for that. Identify what is the data telling you. Take action. Derive meaningful and actionable insights from the data. Optimize. So you go back and from the data, whatever you identified, go back and improve. So this is the recommended approach. And on the bottom, there are some interesting, I would not call my recommendation, but these are some interesting tools that are available in the market today. And I think Gartner rates these as the top 10 that's available in the market for any, not generally in analytics, because you have a help website That's completely different from an e-commerce website like an Amazon or a Flipkart. The needs of different websites are different. According to the needs of any web page or web help, these are some of the interesting tools that are available in the market to do analytics and stuff. So that's all I had. I am open for questions and discussion.
I'm Kalpana. I was working as a, okay, enough. I'll catch up with later on about what I did and what I am right now. So the question I had was, can you give an example for the previous slide that you have put, right? This is a very interesting one. How organizations can implement it. So can you give an example of what a particular goal that can you take as an example and explain how the implementation of the analytics can be done? That would be helpful.
Okay. A basic goal or a basic problem statement could be, what are my customers looking for? I mean, you could write thousands of pages, but what is the customers looking for? What is the user eventually looking for is a problem statement, right? So for that problem, you decide, I mean, most of the analytics tool in the market cater for this problem, but you say this is your problem. I don't know what are my customers looking for. I am writing pages of pages content every shipment, but I frequently get tickets saying that the documentation is not sufficient or the help is not really helpful. You get questions. So you use these tools, or not necessarily tools, you can also directly ask your customers, try to find data about what are they looking for. Say for example, you are a software which is developer oriented. Your developer could be a person who is very techie and he is searching for some technical terms. But your documentation is in simple English language, where what a developer is looking for is there in your documentation, but you don't have the keywords, right? So if somebody comes to your web page, searches for something, the relevant content is existing, but the search term was not, right? So this is where the gap is. What happens generally is we really write useful content, but the gap is always what they'll search for and what is there in the content. So this is a basic problem statement. And another problem that I could immediately think of is, I know an organization who recently implemented this, and they didn't know when to bring down their website for maintenance, right? So they thought, okay, Saturday and Sunday might be the day where generally users are keeping their laptop aside, and they shut down their website for one day on a weekend. They realized that Saturday and Sundays are the days where they have peak consumption. They did not have data about this. They realized, I think Tuesdays were the days the users were relatively consuming less, right? So these are the things around when it is a website, huge website like Google or Microsoft or SAP, there are millions of pages running on their online web, right? So even this decision of updating the website should be carefully taken based on data. So these are basic problems that I can think of, but there are a lot of things that you can solve with data. I hope that answers.
Thank you.
Thanks for presenting. Hi, this is Ajay. So I have a question related to this. So I have a question related to this is mostly what we are seeing here. We don't know the targeted audiences. We are planning to reach out to wider audiences for that. So my question is, what in such scenario, in some scenarios we see that we know that who all our audiences are, like for example subscription-based documents. How data analytics can fit into that scenario? One. Another thing, how we are planning to use data analytics for PDF. I know you can do that, like number of people downloaded it that way. But is there any other matrices that we can follow for PDF documents, especially for the companies like many healthcare industry or many industries, they actually prefer PDF documents. So how we can analyze the data and the data analytics? Thank you.
Okay, I'll answer that in parts. So the first question on subscription-based documentation. So there are really intelligent tools in the market which will give you breakdown to the level where how many of them started your consuming your documentation. Say for example, I'm assuming when you say subscription, it is some amount of payment, and then so there are tools which in the market tracks a user's journey. Somebody started at this page, product X, and then they went to product Y, they realized it's good, and then they paid this much amount, and then after the payment, how much is the consumption, before the payment, how much was the consumption. So this level of detail is available in a lot of intelligent tools that are available in the market, which I have also put down here. So that is easily possible with tools. With respect to PDF, again it depends on what tool you use. Basically, most of the tools offers you how many number of downloads, but there are also intelligent tools. I'm sure you put your PDF in some web page from where it is clickable and downloadable, right? And that's why I said pushing the metadata of your documentation to from your writing tool to the documentation is very essential. So if you are going to structure your documentation in such a way that there is section 1, section 2, section 3, subsection 1, 2, 3, with these tools you can also look into which part of the PDF was clicked, which link was clicked and where did the user go. So this level of analysis is possible with at least some of the tools that are listed here. So it all depends on what problem that you want to solve, what tool you choose, and then it should be easily possible.
I am Xavier. You mentioned that analytics, you're getting analytics, right? So most SaaS products have analytics within the products. They use Kendo or some other tool. The analytics that you said you're gathering is from the product documentation. So would it be better in some parts of it when you are mentioning for a beta product that you're sending, collect those data also, and do you have access to those, and can you work with that also?
Yeah, so that's why I said don't just go to the numbers of your documentation. You can make meaningful insights out of it, meaningful action items, but it is always, that's why I said you always correlate your existing data with stakeholders. So it could be data coming from product, it could be data coming from somebody who's working with the customer directly, and I'm sure most of you, at least some of you, write in-app help these days, where the help is embedded within the tool, or you press some button, something comes up. So there are tools in the market which can track that also, the consumption of that. So we have so far spoken about you have a web page, you have a PDF, then how do you look into track? But in-app help is something different, right? At SAP we call it primary help because that's what users seek first. So there are mechanisms for you to track that also, and then based on that you correlate with your product data. So for example, I have 1,000 visitors for my documentation. Now if I say 1,000 and ask you whether it is a good number or bad number, you wouldn't be in a position to answer. That's why context is more important. Now if you know there are 10,000 customers, 1,000 users could be, then it could be interpreted in a different way. If you have only 500 users and 10,000 views, then the interpretation is different. So that's where the context comes into whatever data could be from product, your beta software, your field agents, whatever you get, you correlate with this and then make decision.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there are no questions, I'm around, we can discuss. Thanks for being an audience and thanks for